What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, December 20th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot going on here today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone. Put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. Okay, right here at the top, big story. They've been going back and forth on this whole interim budget to avoid a government shutdown tomorrow night. As of right now, Trump is saying he will veto the current budget because it doesn't have the wall funding. And I'm glad to see the man showing some spine. I'm absolutely glad to see him showing some spine. And I think he finally woke up and realized that this was all about, Schumer and Pelosi getting into a personal snit with him. And so he's basically saying, Paul Ryan has confirmed Trump will not sign the current Senate spending deal. They're having all kinds of meetings. They've got all day tomorrow to work with it and then through the Christmas weekend. But Trump is holding firm. He wants his wall. We all want the wall. And again, it was one of his major campaign promises. And he's got to start keeping some of them. And building the wall is one of them. Pulling our kids out of Syria, that's sort of kind of starting to get into that promise he made about getting out of some of these foreign interventions. So things are looking a little bit better. Now, getting on into Syria, a lot of people are responding to it a lot of different ways. A lot of them are in agreement with Donald Trump. We beat ISIS and that's all we needed to do, and so it's time for us to leave. Others are saying, no, we understand ISIS was just what was told to the American people, that the United bunches of other stuff like that. So then you have those who are saying that basically it's a defeat, okay? The United States lost in Syria, and it may have been that Donald Trump realized that he was down to two choices, because we were losing. And it was either just, retire with dignity and grace and claim victory against ISIS, or wind up, abandoning Syria with a dozen Marines dangling underneath the helicopter again. And I don't think they wanted to do that. Now, of course, other people say, Russia wins. And this is coming all over Washington, D.C. Russia wins. We were not at conflict with Russia, guys. Supposedly, we were in conflict with ISIS. And ISIS has lost. Trump declared victory over the Islamic State. And there are 2,000 or so U.S. troops will leave Syria within 60 to 100 days. Now, apparently, the diplomatic staff in Damascus is leaving in 24 hours. They're getting out of Dodge here. Story coming on out from Breitbart. A U.S. withdrawal from Syria would be a victory for Iran, Russia, and Turkey. So Breitbart is out there saying, even though the war be wrong, we are in it. We cannot retire without dishonor. Quote Mark Twain, not even a burglar could have said that better. And so the New York Times reported on a full withdrawal phased out over a period of several weeks. But apparently the U.S. air campaign against ISIS will continue, at least for the moment. And not to put too fine a point on it, Donald, it was Russia and Syria who defeated ISIS. Because before Russia came on in, the U.S. was doing a terrible job of it. They would go on in to bomb, ISIS, and they'd miss ISIS, and they'd hit critical Syrian infrastructure like water mains and food storage warehouses and things like that. And the U.S. would say, oh, golly gee, our pilots are just so terrible here, but we're going to keep on bombing until we get all of ISIS here. Now, Germany is slamming the U.S. withdrawal of troops from Syria. And the French Minister for the Armed Forces, Florence Parly, said that France is going to stay in. France is not leaving Syria. They're still going to be there, but it's a very, very small force, and they're not really significant. It really was primarily the United States, and the other players that were in there were just to make it look like it was a coalition. Now, obviously, Vladimir Putin agrees with Trump's correct decision to order the U.S. troop pullout from Syria for a wide variety of reasons. One, it's going to calm things down a little bit. And two, the United States was never supposed to be there. The Syrian government did not invite them. The Syrian government did not give them permission. In fact, the Syrian government kept insisting that they should leave. And now Trump is leaving, and Putin agrees it's a good thing here. Okay, now, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders confirmed the U.S. has already started returning troops home and transiting to the next phase of this campaign. We're not sure what that last part means, next phase of this campaign. It may have something to do with the fact that the airstrikes are continuing. But obviously for those people first out of Syria, they may actually get home in time for Christmas, and what a wonderful present that that's going to be here. So no further details were available about the pullout, but it does seem to be happening. And what's really interesting is, you remember not too long ago, in fact, we're talking just a few weeks, the United States built these multiple observation posts in Syria along the Turkish border, and now they're simply going to be abandoned. In fact, those are some of the first people to leave. They're pulling back to buy some time with Turkey while they complete the full U.S. pullout. Now, the observation posts were presented by the Pentagon as a confidence builder for Turkey to give them warning if any Kurdish forces got too close to the border. Turkey's President Erdogan was deeply critical of the move, saying the U.S. was really observing the Turkish military to prevent them attacking the Kurds. So the fact that those towers are now being abandoned, brand new towers, only used once. Can we resell them? Is there a used watchtower lot somewhere? Sell them online, sell them on eBay. But they're all going to be abandoned. Huge, huge waste of money and materials here. Now, Russia's foreign minister, actually the spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, basically came on out and said the pullout of the U.S. troops from Syria enables an outlook for a Syria political settlement, saying that if the fighting dies down, it's more likely that the leaders from the various political factions are going to sit down at a table and say, okay, it's time for this to be over. It's been 7 years. Where do we go from here? And of course, she made a pointed comment about U.S. troops being in Syria illegally, without a corresponding invitation from the government of Syria, without a resolution from the UN Security Council, and by the way, without a formal declaration of war from the United States Congress as required by the Constitution. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Israel's already out there whining and crying about everything and saying they can't hit Syria targets because they're flying Russian flags. And they're accusing Moscow of allowing fighters from Hezbollah and pro-Iranian Shiite groups to carry Russian flags in order to protect them from Syrian airstrikes. Well, it almost makes sense Russia would do that, given how Israel tends to just shoot at pretty much anything that moves here. But apparently Moscow appears reluctant to get over the loss of the plane during that IAF bombing raid in Syria in September, saying that Israel did not provide sufficient warning of the strike to allow the Russian Ilyushin aircraft to reach safety. And Russia's still angry about that, and that may be the reason why they're handing out Russian flags. And in another sign that Russia is not over the loss of the Ilyushin, Russia is green-lighting retaliatory Syrian attacks on Israeli targets. See, with the U.S. moving on out and ISIS all but gone, Turkey's going to be mixing it up with the Kurds. And Syria's biggest problem right now is Israel, that still wants to come on in and bomb anything that they claim comes from Iran. So Syria is adopting a new rule of engagement with Israel now that Russia is taking a tougher and clearer stance on the conflict between Israel and the so-called axis of the resistance. Henceforth, Damascus will be responding to any Israeli strike. If Israel damages a specific military target, Syria will reply with a strike against a similar objective in Israel. If Israel bombs the Syrian airport, Syria will bomb an Israeli airport. And this is with the consent of the Russian military based in the Levant. Apparently, the Russians have been holding Syria back from taking a stronger response to the constant provocation. Okay. Meanwhile, the Turkish army is reinvigorating its military positions at the borders to prepare for more operations in eastern Syria. And looks like they're going to kick off an assault on the Kurds along the eastern side of the Euphrates as the U.S. withdraws from the Syrian territories. Now, at one point, yes, the U.S. was supporting the Kurds, but at this point, it looks like the Kurds are on their own here. Okay. The Arabic language website of Sputnik quoted a Turkish military source as saying that based on an agreement between the United States and Turkey, the American forces will withdraw from the bordering areas which will witness the first stage of the military operations. This dovetails with the story I just did about abandoning all those recently built watchtowers. Now, Erdogan is out there saying that a new military operation in Syria could start at any moment, coming in from Turkey, going after those Kurds. Now, the Kurdish group, and they are backed by the U.S., the Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Units, or otherwise the YPG, it's considered a terrorist organization by Ankara. But it looks like they're being abandoned by their sponsors. You know, the United States will hook up with these various jihadi groups to achieve a short-term objective, and then they'll drop them. And that's the way the U.S. operates. You're our buddy now while you're useful, and as soon as you're no longer useful, you're on your own. Getting into other parts of the world, Ukraine has issued a statement. They will retaliate after any Russian attacks, quote, "we have no alternative," end quote. Now, Russia's not attacking Ukraine, but Ukraine could easily claim that. Now, a Ukrainian official has confirmed the country will once again send warships through the Kerch Strait into the Sea of Azov, igniting another potential clash with Russia. And that if Russia tries to capture the ships, gunfire will take place. All Ukraine has to do is let them know 48 hours in advance, hey, we're coming through. 24 hours in advance, say, yeah, we're still going to do it. And they can go on through. Ukraine provoked this Kerch crisis by sending in 2 patrol boats and a tugboat that didn't go through the protocols, didn't fill out the paperwork, didn't make the appropriate phone calls, just plowed on in. And that's what provoked all of this. All right, we've got a phone call. Layla in Ontario, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I was going to wait until after Christmas to even raise this subject, but I think Christmas time is a good time for people to get together if they're not working and try and come up with some kind of solution. These 3 governments, Mexico, the U.S., and Canada, tried to impose secretly a North American Union on us. They may indeed have. So it's time that we turn the tables on them. I wonder if the citizens, the taxpayers of Canada and the U.S. are able, I don't know if there's such a thing as a class action lawsuit that can be implemented either in each country or together. If it's done together, it may have to be an international lawyer. There must be some way that we can hold the governments accountable without having to resort to violence. There's no need for us to spill blood or let them make us kill one another. Right now, people are targeting, are looking at Muslims as being the victims. The truth is that they're being exploited by the governments. They're being shipped here. But it's not just the Muslims. It's the Hindus. It's the Sikhs. It's the Punjabis. It's so many others. I mean, for example, in Canada, the first thing that I found offensive was when the RCMP had to give up the Canadian hat in their uniform to allow a Sikh to keep his turban, and then to wear one of their religious knives under their clothing for kids to go to school. It's not just Muslims that have changed our culture, and it's time we stop looking at them. And this absurdity of claiming that, oh, everything's over in Syria. No, we've destroyed lives. We've separated families. We've killed half the families. We've allowed it to happen. Even those of us who weren't there, we allowed it to happen. Now, we've had to pay our taxes because as individuals, we know that governments will seize our assets if we stop paying our taxes. But if as a group we get together and use, the problem is, lawyers themselves have been intimidated. Which lawyer would take on a class action lawsuit? Is there? And I'm hoping somebody out there knows of a lawyer who is willing to either take on a class action lawsuit or a lawyer who's a specialist in international law who can do something like a class action lawsuit in some sort of international legal. The international courts are obviously biased or controlled by the UN. There must be some way we can use our legal system, our judiciary, to actually do its duty for us. And we do have convergent interests here, Canadians and Americans.
Okay, now I don't know about the laws in Mexico and Canada, but unfortunately in our country, it's very difficult to sue the government. They enjoy sovereign immunity, and they can't be sued for anything that they do in their official capacity. And that you have to catch them doing something that really is outside the law or outside the rules to get a lawsuit going. I can think of two lawyers who would have the cojones to go after the government, and that would be Larry Klayman and Tom Fitton. The question is exactly what are you suing the government for? You're talking about a class action lawsuit. What is the lawsuit seeking to do? What is its objective?
First of all, the very fact that they are bringing in illegal migrants of unknown violent potential, as well as inability to adapt and contribute. The whole point of immigration, when you have immigration legislation, the whole point has always been that they have to come in because they can contribute something that is needed within the country to which they're being admitted.
All right, then I have an idea. I have an idea. What we need is the government is not enforcing its own laws, but we already have Title VIII on the books. What we need are lawyers who are willing to file civil litigation against every one of these politicians, mayors, governors, attorney generals, like the guy in New Jersey, who are in violation of Title VIII by aiding and abetting the illegal immigrants. And then we might be able to do something about that. As far as the...
aiding and abetting is the ideal, because it's like aiding and abetting thieves, because they're stealing the rights, the benefits. I'm able to get the Canadian pension now, but the next generation will not be able to have it because we'll be broke. They're being denied good education. They're being denied jobs. And this is all intentional.
Yeah, Layla, I'm sorry to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about events in the conflict zones around the world. Russia has completed rearming the air defense forces in Crimea with its advanced S-400 Triumph surface-to-air missile systems. And this, along with the sending of more than 10 Sukhoi fighters and apparently they have some submarines in the area as well. They're sending a message to Ukraine. No, in point of fact, you are not going to come on here and stage a provocation. Okay, we're going to take another call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike Poroshenko just said there's going to be an imminent liberation of occupied Donbass. So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen in the next few days. Before, like they said, remember the Russian Sergei Lavrov? Before the end of the month, right? So something's going to, I don't know if this has to do with moving troops out of Syria or not, but like, things are happening. And Mike, with Syria, if the Kurds should be on the phone right now with Assad, right? I mean, we got a deal. We want a deal. We want a deal. Because Turkey's coming in.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so you would think they would want to have some kind of... And Mike, remember that the PKK
yes.
is considered a terrorist group in Turkey, but the YPG,
yep.
the United States considers like rebels. It's the same group.
Yeah,
right?
it's the same. It's the same group, but Turkey considers YPG a terrorist group, and for that matter, I think so does Syria.
Yeah. So like, yeah. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know if it's,
I mean, the only real difference.
got his own plan.
The only real difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is which way they're pointing.
Just like the outposts.
Yes.
Yeah, those outposts could be used by the Syrians now to look outward, right?
They could, but they'd have to fight through the Kurds to get to them.
And Mike, remember there's a report Russia also moved to Manbij, or no, to, was it on top? Is that what it's called? They moved in air defense systems?
Yes.
So the United States, even though they're pulling out, they could do airstrikes, but the Russians are going to have air defenses over. Of course, once the U.S. pulls out, it doesn't matter if the United States could do airstrikes. The Russians' air defenses or Syria's air defenses are going to be moved into that area.
Well, I'm sure as long as the United States is bombing ISIS to get rid of all the evidence of their involvement, they'll be left alone by Russia and Syria. But I mean, the lesson of the Vietnam War is you cannot win a war solely from the air. They tried there and they failed miserably, and they spent a huge amount of money doing it, which was, of course, the real purpose of the Vietnam War was, buy and grind up a lot of war munitions and get the American people to pay for it.
And with France, Mike, you said, I think there's a debate going on in France right now to either stay or leave, but they're going to be left on a little thingy without a paddle because there ain't going to be nobody there but them. So I don't know. They got a small force there because remember there was I think a year ago, there was a picture taken with a French armored vehicle with the flag on it.
Yes.
And they said they weren't there, but that proved they were. So I don't know what France would, what they can do being there in such a small group. They're not going to accomplish anything. So I think France is coming out.
Well, I disagree with that. I think, Macron right now could use, some kind of blood and guts distraction to take the media's focus off the yellow vests.
This is true, but he also has got some military generals that aren't liking him too much. Not saying there's going to be no coup in France. I doubt that because that's not how it works over there. But, he's got... The police don't like him, and most likely some of the generals don't like him for his policies. But, I don't know what Trump's going to do yet, because there's a lot of, like you said, a different phase of the campaign means anything.
Yes.
So we can't really go, you know what I mean? We can't really figure out what's going on until it happens. But that's all I want to say, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Art, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Caught me in the middle of making a pot of coffee here, but hey, it is what it is, right? Here's what I don't get. I've heard numbers ranging anywhere from 10.2 billion, and we're talking with a B, rhymes with bad. I've heard numbers running anywhere from 10.2 billion, 10.6 billion, Rush Limbaugh's touting 10.8 billion, that America has earmarked. And God, I can't believe we're doing this again. We're going to send, we, the good people of America, are going to send $10.6 10.8, whatever it is, billion dollars to Mexico and South Central America. It's going to be divided up between them to help prop them up economically and create jobs. All right.
Yeah, we talked
Now,
about that yesterday.
I don't get why it's so hard to get funding for the wall without, if we can do this, if we can send this kind of money to them, if we can send 800 million a year.
Art, got to put you on hold. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Art off the grid, who's making coffee. And we're also talking about the story that we covered yesterday about how the U.S. is sending $10+ billion down to Mexico and Central America for their security and to create jobs. And, of course, my first thought is, like Art, well, can't we use some of that money to build the border wall? And why aren't we spending the rest of that money here in the United States on our security and creating more jobs for Americans? What business is it of the United States to be sending that money down there to these other countries? Those countries are the responsibility of those governments. And, of course, it's a way for the United States to maintain control over those governments. And I'm sure that large chunks of that cash get shaved off as bribes to various government officials.
Yeah, I mean, we know for a fact, anytime, this pouring billions and billions of dollars we send all around the world in foreign aid, I think less than 10% of it actually makes it to the people. The rest of it make it into the pockets of corrupt politicians and corporations.
Yes.
And it's just, I do not understand. I mean, $10 billion. We already have a 20-something plus trillion dollar debt. Now, with that kind of debt, if we can afford to send that kind of money to Mexico and South America, we certainly can come up with the money to build. To how many thousands of good, hardworking American men and women could benefit from jobs that would be created just building this wall? And I mean, this is just, we've become the world's pocketbook. We cannot afford to keep doing this.
No,
and
we can't do that. And the other part of it is, despite the open borders people saying, well, the immigrants and the refugees are taking jobs that Americans aren't willing to take. Right now, Americans are desperate. They'll take, any job that's out there where they can feed their family. And the more illegal immigrants and refugees we allow to pour into this country, they're competing for those same jobs. And that means fewer jobs for the American people.
Here's the thing, though. These are not jobs that Americans won't take. They're jobs that Americans won't take for $2 and $3 an hour. That's what they're not telling you. And this garbage of government shutdowns, we're having a big debate here in my local area of just what government shutdowns mean. And I'm trying to educate people. We're talking non-essential personnel. We're talking people like the vendors who do tours, the tour guides at Yosemite Park, for example,
yes.
The National Park Service employees. These are the people that are going to be without jobs until they pull their heads out of their dank, musty areas and get a clue. This is ridiculous. And Mike, I found the solution to the problem if people are willing to listen.
Go ahead.
And it's real simple. You stop going to the movies. Stop going out to dinner. Stop doing all these fun things that cost money. Take that money and start investing in bulk food supplies like sugar, salt, beans, rice, stuff like that. Stockpile that. Start stocking up on ammo. Start stocking up on medical supplies like alcohol and peroxide and things like that you need. Stop spending the money doing all this fun stuff and let these companies start feeling the impact in their pocketbooks. And then when you got a good enough stockpile of food, say 6 or 8 months worth of food, and this is possible, it's not hard to do, then you stop grocery shopping. You stop shopping at Walmart. You stop shopping at Big Lot. Stop going to Sears. Stop going to JCPenney. Stop going anywhere and doing anything. Just go to work, stay home. Don't do it. And then eventually the work is going to peter out. And then people are going to, what's going on? Then maybe we can get somebody to listen.
But until we hit them where it hurts, they're not going to listen to a damn thing that any of us say. Because they don't care.
Yep. You're absolutely right about that last part. You're absolutely right. Everybody's out to line their own pocket right now. I think we're in the stage of the history of our nation where our leaders, both corporate and government, are grabbing the silverware, shoving it in their pockets, and heading for the doors. We even have a coffee mug that we sell over at our online store that says the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And to me, it feels like that we're in that phase right now.
We are. That's exactly where we are right now. The American people are being looted for everything that they've got. And if we don't do something now, we're not going to have anything left. And I don't know about y'all, but I happen to be quite, I happen to like what I've got. I've got a nice little piece of land out here in the country that I really enjoy, where I can do my thing and have my garden and have my animals and do my own thing. And I'll be damned to go to hell if I'm going to lay down and let some jackass take it away from me because he's too greedy and thinks that he deserves everything that I work for. And you people out there, you need to stop this. Unless you get active. Listening to the radio and making phone calls and talking, that's all good and well. But it's time to stop damn talking. Mike, I have not been to a grocery store in 6 months. And I'm looking at a good 2 years before I ever have to worry about food. So I'm already doing what I talk about. I've been doing this for years. I don't know what it's going to take to get the rest of the people to figure out this is the only way to solve the problem. We can't rely on government, Donald Trump, or anybody else. We have to be the ones to do this. The only way to affect change is through a revolution. We do this peacefully or we do it violently. It's not the government's choice. It is our choice.
I prefer the Gandhi approach, to be very honest. And as I've stated many times before, I hear your frustration and your rage and anger, and I hear from so many people that something has to be done, but nobody's really sure exactly what. And I reject out of hand violence in the streets, although it seems to be happening anyway. And like the war itself, it seems to be something I am unable to interfere with or slow down or stop.
Absolutely, and it's time for a revolution. And like Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make a violent revolution inevitable. We either do this peacefully or we do it violently. I prefer the peaceful method, but I am not above getting violent if I have to. Mike, I'm ready to fight at this point. I am so sick and tired of the talk and the blah, 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 blah. I am ready to fight. I am that mad right now.
I can hear it. I hear it.
Anyway, thanks, man. We'll talk at you another time.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm watching C-SPAN there with the House, and they're all up in an uproar about Trump and this border money. And I just got to tell you, I know you guys aren't that fond of Trump, but I've never had a politician that frustrates my enemies more than Trump does. I mean, the way he's playing Pelosi and Schumer with this $5 billion for the border wall, it's just good to see the left have their heads explode like mine had to explode for 8 years of Obama and Bush Jr. And it's the same way with Syria. I mean, all the neocons, all the rhinos, they're all out there screaming bloody murder. You know, there's Lindsey Graham, and even a lot of Democrats. They we can't pull the troops out of Syria. They're, Obama, when he had to go in, well, they don't talk about the fact that Obama was funding the ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Yes.
But it's just what I really love about this guy, no matter what you want to say about him, is the way it's finally the left. It's finally the neocons that have to turn on their TV and get pissed off and frustrated. And that's what Trump is doing. And you can say, oh, well, whatever, but that's what's happening. You watch these neocons on TV. They're having a stroke about this.
Yes.
And I heard Nancy Pelosi.
Joe, are you there?
The peace liberal to the liberals, and then meanwhile she brings it up for the neocons. Which side is she on Syria? Nobody ever asks her. Hello?
Yeah, you're still on the air.
Oh, so it's funny how, like, they'll let her, like, say, well, Trump pulling out of Syria is going to create this. Well, which side are you on, Nancy? I'm curious, because how is she going to explain to the left peace part of her party that she's a neo-lib. She wants troops in Syria, just like Obama did and Hillary, but she likes to play both sides of the game. And one thing that I noticed about Trump more than anything, he shines the spotlight on these people. It's almost like they come out of their holes and show who they are. And this thing with the border fence is just a wall is just outstanding. I mean, they're having conniptions, and I'm hoping that he does shut down the government, and I'm hoping that he finally destroys this myth about the necessariness, or whatever, that's a good word, but anyway, of keeping the government running. It'll be worth his presidency if he can just finally, as a Republican, say, shut it down and show that it's just a fake, that this whole thing about being intimidated since Gingrich about shutting the government down is fake. Most people don't care. Most people will applaud it. But in Washington, D.C., in that closed shop, they all, don't shut the government down. The people will go crazy. That's a load of malarkey. Call their bluff, Trump. Get that money for the border wall and continue to frustrate my enemies. I'm loving it.
Well, I'm loving it too. And as I said at the top of the show, I'm rather delighted to see that Trump is showing some spine on this. And again, you need to understand, when they talk about a government shutdown, it's not the whole government. What shuts down are all the things we, the American people, like the national parks, museums, things like that. The parts of the government that we don't like, they stay open and keep making us miserable no matter what.
Well, there was a president, I don't know if it was Garfield or one of those guys back in the 1920s, and there was a big financial crisis, and all he did to solve the financial crisis was he just cut the government by like 20%. And because so many of those jobs are unproductive and it's just a waste of money. And it's kind of the stock market panic that you never hear about. And the reason you never hear about it was because of what he did and how it worked. And they don't want you to know that that's a great way to spur the economy and help yourself during a panic, is to just cut government. And it works. But of course, the government
really does.
runs the media, and they don't want that message out. So it's the ignored financial panic. I think in 1920 or something like that.
Sounds about right.
I got to say that.
You're absolutely right, though. Corporate media and the government don't want the American people to think about just how huge the government is, because almost 20% of the entire population is involved in government work at one level or another, and that is way too heavy a management structure. Anybody who talks about a well-run business, management should never exceed 10% of the workforce, and our management exceeds that by quite a wide margin. In fact, I think it's closer to 25%.
Oh, no, and then you look at how the contempt they have for the American people. When you see some of these videos Project Veritas did, where these government employees are bragging about committing crimes and being members of Antifa and subverting the president and all these other things. And they say, well, they can't fire me. I'm a government employee. Well, that's got to change. But
I agree with you on that one. I agree with you on that one, because there are so many people, who will, kiss the right derrieres, and they'll get hired into a government job, and once they're there, they know they can't be fired, so they don't really have an incentive to do really well. In fact, there's this culture within government of not standing out by doing a better job. In Japan, they have a saying for that the nail that sticks up gets hammered. And that's certainly true within the government as well. And so that's why it's so big and bloated and ineffective. The government can take years to make very, very simple decisions, and take even years more to admit things didn't go well and find somebody to blame for it. It really is a mess. But back during the creation of this nation, I forget which one of the founding fathers said it, but he said, that government governs best which governs least. And back when this country was created, that central federal government was very, very small, and it was intentionally designed that way. It was intentionally designed to be weak and very limited, and the majority of authority in this country rested with the sovereign states and the local communities, counties, and so forth and so on. But slowly over the years, especially after the Civil War, the central federal government just started grabbing power to itself left and right, and now we're in this huge mess where we're living in this dystopian society.
Well, the problem that I see with the government and anywhere institutions in general is the more it's a perverse incentive that when they fail they get more money. I mean, it's really the better you do. If you come in on budget or below budget, you'll actually get called on the carpet. So it's got a perverse incentive, and that is a big part of it. But besides the fact that government, look, I got to say the education system, which is tied in with the government, but the universities in particular, I don't know why the Republicans and the conservatives don't go after funding for the universities. All these kids that are coming out that are Antifa and they're anti-American, anti-whatever, they're being trained at these universities that our tax dollars are sponsoring. The right should start reading the book about, I forgot who wrote it, but Defund the Left. It has to happen because they're really winning in the brainwashing of the younger generation.
They are. They're just creating more thought police, more political correct nonsense. And
no, it's unbelievable. And who's paying for it? You and me. Well, I don't mind if somebody's paying for that because they're giving scholarships or whatever. But no, this tax money, and you can't give tax money to somebody that's preaching or religious, and yet you can give them to give them this phony religion of climate change. Did you see they had these people? They changed Christmas carols to climate change carols, and I thought it was very fitting because they're replacing one religion with another. And
you're
thought
exactly
that,
right.
Really shows how
the British courts actually declared belief in global warming is actually a religion. Anyway, listen, Joe, we got to let you go. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Al in West Virginia. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Hey, my solution, I'm kind of heading towards Art there. I think it was Art that was pretty frustrated. I've said this for years. Quit funding the government. Quit paying taxes. If you could get enough people together, everybody together, that's the problem, getting everybody together. If you quit paying taxes, they're not going to put you on jail. If they put you in jail, then who's going to pay the taxes to fund them?
Yeah, the problem is getting everybody to agree to do it, because there's there's this fear of the Internal Revenue Service coming down on people individually, and it is a deliberate fear campaign. To basically keep everybody in line. And there's this wonderful little video. In fact, I'm going to put it up on the internet, or at whatreallyhappened.com rather. It's called The Tiny Dot, that basically shows why this is all continuing to work. But in any event, I want to go back and reiterate that it looks to me like this government and this economy are on the edge of a crash, which is going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people, not just in this country, but around the world. And I know people are frustrated. I could hear that in Art's voice. But again, my advice is, be prepared to deal with the aftermath. and just be patient. And I know it's hard to be patient because it seems like every day the abuses continue to pile up, the effrontery piles up, there's another insult to our intelligence coming out of corporate media, and I can feel that people are reaching that breaking point, and I'm somewhat alarmed at that.
Absolutely, but I'm just saying that's the most non-violent way to take care of the situation. If you could just get everybody to get on the bandwagon here, just quit, just refuse to pay taxes. Don't be paying income tax. Don't be paying any kind of tax, period. And just say, no, we've had enough. You're giving all our money away to these foreign countries. No. And you keep upping the debit, the debt there all the time, and keeping us in debt. This is ridiculous. We're not going to pay it no more. Plain and simple. Here's the way it is. They don't even have enough prisons to put all of us in there, and they wouldn't do it anyway because who would be out there working the whole country would collapse if nobody's working. If they put everybody in prison.
Well, you see, we can
have to have everybody together.
We can do that with a general strike.
You can get people.
We can do that with the general strike, getting them back to the approach that Mahatma Gandhi used to get Britain out of India. He would call for days of prayer and fasting, which basically amounted to a general strike where the population just didn't go to work. And it proved to be extraordinarily effective. Okay, thank you for the phone call, Al. We're going to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the news here. Over in Crimea, the FSB has thwarted a Kiev terrorist plot, and they've arrested a gang member who had 12 kilograms of TNT, which is a lot. That's a pretty big bang. And apparently the accused is related to the nationalist organization Nomen, I can't even pronounce it, Battalion. And this was a prominent figure in Crimean Tatar history. He was head of the Crimean Tatar national government in 1917-1918 and was a writer, poet, and author of the national anthem. But apparently Kiev was getting ready to do something really nasty inside Crimea, and it has now been thwarted. Now, this really should wake people up as to how dangerous the situation is. More than 40 U.S. senators have called on President Donald Trump to conduct a multinational military operation against Russia in the Black Sea. Now, they're saying this is all about freedom of navigation as well as to demonstrate support for, quote, internationally recognized borders, end quote, and to resist the excessive claims of Russia to sovereignty. The senators are also calling for NATO to increase its presence in the Black Sea, as well as a call for European allies and partners to deny Russian warships the right to call their ports for resupply and refueling. Well, I have a message to those 40 U.S. senators. Here are your rifles. Here are your parachutes. Here are your day-glow jumpsuits left over from the CIA torture centers. And first of all, you need to understand access to the Black Sea is covered by a treaty called the Montreux Convention, which says that only nations that border the Black Sea itself are allowed to have a permanent presence there. Other ships are time limited, especially warships. Of course, we understand we live in an age where the United States government is basically abandoning treaties left and right. But one of the senators over there is out there saying that this is a reckless move by these 40 senators. And it's going to incite more mischief from Kiev. And they're absolutely right. Now, apparently, also in this document, along with NATO should be in the Black Sea and everything, it included the call for an end to the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which is supposed to link Russia and Germany along the bottom of the Baltic Sea. So once again, we see the true motive. Cut off that pipeline, keep Germany dependent on pipelines that we have control over rather than Russia. Okay, Ukraine is going to send more warships back to Azov, despite the Russian capture of the 2 patrol boats and the tugboat. And from the way they're describing it, it looks like, once again, they will not notify Russia 48 hours in advance that they wish to transit the Kerch Strait, or remind them 24 hours ahead of time that they're still going to do it. That was the only requirement for anybody to go into the Sea of Azov. Is you just go through that little process. Let Russia know you're going to be there. But Ukraine is out there saying this should be freedom of navigation. Anybody should have the right to come and go as they please. Well, that's ridiculous. When you're dealing with a narrow channel, there's got to be some kind of traffic control, and that's what this is all about. You know, freedom of navigation. People don't just cram through the Panama Canal as fast as they can, or the Suez Canal. So, again, Ukraine provoked this. They provoked this thing. Okay, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Alexander Turchnov, said that Ukraine plans to carry out a new passage of ships through the Kerch Strait with the involvement of international partners. He says, this is for us fundamental. If we stop and retreat, Russia will actually fulfill its task of seizing the Sea of Azov, presenting to the world certain new sea borders of the Black Sea, de facto legalizing the occupation of the Crimea. Now, one more time, Crimea voted to leave Ukraine, then voted to merge with the Russian republics. Now, putting this stuff all together, it looks to me like this major naval operation these 40 senators are urging Donald Trump to do is to basically go up and conquer Crimea, invade Crimea, and hand it back to Ukraine. And I have to admit, I can't imagine Russia sitting still for that one. That would definitely be way, way over the line. But we all have to keep pushing back on that propaganda that somehow Russia stole Crimea. And we need to just keep telling everybody the Crimean people, following the U.S.-sponsored coup d'etat that drove Yanukovych from power and installed Poroshenko, the Crimean people held a referendum, and they seceded, which is their right under the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then they held a second referendum to merge with the Russian republics. Russia didn't invade. Russia didn't annex them. Russia didn't conquer them. Russia isn't occupying them. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, U.S. forces are establishing a new base in Iraq near the border with Syria. And this is in defiance of widespread calls to end its military presence in Iraq. Iraq is sick and tired of us being there as well. And American troops have built a military base in the Al-Maliha area near the town of Al-Qaim, which is located nearly 400 kilometers northwest of Baghdad and along the Euphrates River. This is from Iraq's independent Arabic language newspaper Al-Mashriq, quoting the town's mayor, Ahmed El-Malawi, as saying, the new base is close to the borderline with Syria, apparently aimed at monitoring the border to protect the U.S. forces deployed inside Syria near the Iraq-Syrian border. Well, that's no longer going to be necessary because the U.S. forces, we are told, are going to be leaving. And the mayor noted this is the second base of its kind because another one was set up earlier this month. So, looking at the Euphrates here, you have Iraq and Turkey on one side, and you have Syria on the other, and in particular the area held by the Kurds, who basically want their own country. And for a while, the U.S. was supporting them. when it looked like we were going to win in Syria and actually start breaking it up. Oh, we're going to give the Golan to Israel and we're going to break off a chunk. That'll be the new Kurdistan. But right now, the Kurds must be feeling very much like they're being abandoned by their U.S. backers, which would be true. Okay. A report by a Palestinian Human Rights Center reveals that Israeli forces have killed at least 54 Palestinian children and arrested over 900 others since the beginning of this year. And the report also said that 80% of the children were killed during the peaceful demonstrations in the so-called buffer zone in the Gaza Strip, the Great March of Return. And the report condemned what it described as Israel's systematic violation of Palestinian children's rights, to which I would add all Palestinians' rights. Now, according to the group's investigation, conducted by the Palestinian Center for Study and Documentation, Israel's rights violation is not limited to trial of children in military courts, but it starts from the moment of arrest, where Israelis will carry out interrogation sessions in which children are often handcuffed, blindfolded, beaten, and insulted. The latest child victim from Khan Yunis in southern Gaza was 4 years old. Okay. Now, members of the Israeli parliament have given preliminary approval to controversial legislation enabling the forced displacement within the West Bank of Palestinian attackers' family members. And the bill comes after a wave of deadly Palestinian attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers in the occupied West Bank, with its sponsors saying it would deter future attackers. I really doubt it, because what they're describing as deadly Palestinian attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers are a response to the soldiers and settlers invading their towns. We were talking about one yesterday where they just marched into this town, started shooting up the school. Apparently, there were some Arab lawmakers who were expelled from the chamber for disrupting the procedures. Okay, now, interestingly enough, 2 senators, Feinstein and Sanders, urged the Senate leaders not to include controversial legislation targeting boycotters of Israel in an end-of-the-year spending the bill that must pass to keep the government running. And what's really interesting is that both Feinstein and Sanders are themselves Jewish, but they warned that including this bill, this boycott act in the bill, would infringe on free speech and violate Senate officials' commitment to oppose controversial riders on appropriations bills. Well, good for them. I definitely agree. What may be going on here is the realization that the instant that bill is passed with that rider, you're going to have public interest groups like Judicial Watch or Freedom Watch. They're going to go right to the Supreme Court. And there is no way the Supreme Court is going to say that law is constitutional. It is a clear violation of the First Amendment. Now, the latest word we have on the budget and the government shutdown is that the Senate, or rather the House, is already rewriting the new budget. They're putting the money for the wall back in. So it looks like, and good for Donald Trump. Good for Donald Trump. He's finally put on those presidential brass knuckles. Now, the New York Times, which is normally very pro-Israel in its editorial position, is actually calling out AIPAC and the Anti-Defamation League for the assault on free speech, criticizing Israel. So this is going to be a loser. It will not withstand a Supreme Court challenge, and it will be a major defeat for Israel and its supporters. And so the New York Times, Feinstein, and Sanders may be saying, let's avoid that embarrassment. Now, resistance to U.S. laws censoring criticism of Israel has now been driven mainstream by this incident down in Texas, where the speech pathologist was required to sign what amounts to a loyalty oath to Israel, basically a pledge not to support the boycott, not to criticize Israel, And what's that got to do with speech pathology or the state of Texas? But apparently there are now 2 separate lawsuits filed this week against that Texas law, requiring state contractors to certify they will not boycott Israel. One of the lawsuits was filed by a local newspaper in Arkansas, which refused to sign a similar pledge in order to win an advertising contract. Now, on Monday, the Council of American Islamic Relations filed a federal lawsuit on behalf of Aiea Amawi. This is the speech pathologist in Texas who refused to sign who lost her contract with the Austin Public School District because she would not sign that statement saying she would not boycott Israel. And now the ACLU is stepping on in. They're filing a First Amendment challenge to the state law that requires government contractors to certify they are not engaged in boycotts of Israel or territories controlled by Israel. Now, the lawsuit was filed on behalf of 4 Texans, argues that the law, HB 89, which went into effect last year, does violate the First Amendment's protection against government intrusion into political speech. And this could be the one that goes all the way to the Supreme Court and ends all this nonsense about trying to pass laws in this country saying you cannot criticize or boycott Israel. Now, the pro-Israel people are back on out there saying this law is justified. We have to stop the boycotts against Israel because, after all, the Nazis' first action against the Jews was a boycott of Jewish businesses. So apparently, if you're a supporter of the First Amendment, you're a Nazi. And I'd like to remind everybody that before the Nazis took any actions against the Jews of any kind, Judea declared war on Germany following its shutting down of the private central bank. They were calling for a global boycott on Germany. But that was a good thing because, it's on our side now. The other day we were talking about how 2 Palestinian boys who were up on the roof of their home were killed in what Israel likes to call knocking on the roof. The way Israel claims that they're going to minimize civilian casualties is they'll fly over a building, they'll drop a small bomb on the roof that will cause a lot of damage, but it will tell everybody inside the building, you've got so many minutes to get out because we're coming back to level the place. But apparently there were these 2 boys that were just up on the roof. They got killed. And Israel came on out with a video showing we had no way of knowing, we couldn't see them. It's already been revealed that Israel's military tampered with its own surveillance footage of the attack to conceal the fact that the children were visible to the drone pilots who carried out the strikes. Okay, the World Food Program announced on Wednesday they have to have cuts in food to Gaza, to some 190,000 impoverished Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, citing a severe funding shortfall. The money is not coming on in. And the UN agency said it would, as of January the 1st, suspend food assistance to 27,000 people in the West Bank. In addition, food aid to 165,000 people in the territory in the Gaza Strip would be reduced by 20%. Meanwhile, speaking of boycotts, Israel has stopped importing all West Bank fruits and vegetables. Even though they're constantly at odds with each other, Israel likes that West Bank produce, and they have been importing it from the West Bank to sell in Israeli markets. And it's one of the ways the Palestinians can make some money. That's their thing, really, is agriculture. Fruits, vegetables, oranges, olives, that kind of thing. But apparently Israel is now boycotting the West Bank farmers to put more economic pressure on them. Now, Israel has decided that they are not going to allow any more vaccines to enter Palestine. And the story began with this Lara Hamdan had no idea when she went to the Health Services Center in Ramallah to vaccinate her 1-year-old daughter. The vaccination was not available, and she had to wait until Israeli authorities allowed the vaccines to enter Palestine. Actually, in this case, Israel is doing the Palestinians a favor. If you look at how dangerous those vaccines have become. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sure Israel's going to say, oh yeah, sending crates and crates of the vaccines here. Just get them all over there here. Meanwhile, the United States is going to increase aid to Israel by $200 million in 2019. And the requested funds are the result of a $38 billion 10-year memorandum of understanding signed between Israel and the United States at the end of Obama's term. Now, you have to wonder, what does Israel have on U.S. politicians that would allow them to let Americans starve and go homeless, especially our veterans, as Israel sells billions in arms, including the Iron Dome system? I mean, you think about that. My opinion is this government has no business sending a penny of your tax dollars to any foreign government while there are Americans sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash dumpsters. I was kind of hoping that that would be part of Trump's putting America first agenda. Okay, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently, relations between Israel and Russia are not doing too good. And apparently, things have been tense ever since that shoot down of the Ilyushin-20 aircraft in Syria, which Moscow blames on Israel carrying out a strike without an advance warning so the plane could get out of the way. And it's been complicated by the fact that Moscow is now dealing directly with people in Palestine. Putin is going to meet the head of Hamas. And apparently Hamas is sending their political bureau head, Ismail Haniyeh, would travel to Moscow. And it was an official invitation from the Russian Foreign Ministry. And Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki has also been invited to Moscow. It's not clear whether he would sit down with Haniyeh. So that situation is out there. Now, as you know, the United States is pulling out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty on the claim that a newly developed Russian missile exceeds the limitations of that treaty. And the United States is now demanding that Russia allow the United States to inspect that new nuclear missile, which basically amounts to, we're going to spy on it and see if there are any cool ideas in there that we can take. Russia has said basically they're not going to do that. It's not justifiable. And in any event, the United States had previously refused Russian requests to inspect U.S. submarines in relation to a different arms treaty. So that is really going nowhere. Okay, now, as you know, there's a big case going on here in the United States, which is more Russia bashing, and it has to do with Maria Butina, who supposedly has confessed she's a Russian agent working for the Kremlin. And what she'd been doing inside the United States of America, she was working for the National Rifle Association, and she was making contact with members of the Republican Party. And the U.S. government is saying she was actually working for the Kremlin. Moscow is insisting that the charge is absolutely ridiculous, and they fear that she was coerced into making the confession. Well, come on now. The United States government would never coerce a confession. Remember Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the guy who was considered, that we were told was the mastermind of 9/11? And he confessed. He confessed. They only had to waterboard him 180 times to get that confession. So, yeah, the United States does force confessions. Over in France, things are still very tense regarding the yellow vest. And interestingly enough, Emmanuel Macron has turned to his predecessor, Sarkozy, to ask for advice. And apparently they met at the Élysée Palace for a lunch and discussed public order, as well as Macron's recently announced tax exemption for overtime work. Now, there's a very alarming story coming out of Investment Watch blog where apparently French security forces are ready to smother the center of Paris with what's called a last resort chemical weapon in a bid to keep protesters away from key buildings. And apparently this system sprays a powder which, when it gets in contact with your skin, it's debilitating, and it can be spread across an area the size of 6 soccer pitches in just 10 seconds, which underscores the increasing desperation of Macron's administration. Because the protests, contrary to what you're hearing in the corporate media, they're not fizzling out and they're not going away. So here we have Macron using chemical weapons against his own people. So I wonder when Donald Trump is going to send in those cruise missiles to blow up something really important inside France as a lesson that rulers of countries are not supposed to use chemical weapons on their own people. Over in China, they have arrested a 3rd Canadian citizen as this feud worsens. And no further details were provided other than saying that the Canadian government was aware of a 3rd citizen being detained. And Global Affairs diplomatically refused to connect this 3rd arrest to the arrest of Hawaii CFO Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver earlier this month. Now, she's been released on bail, but she's got to wear an ankle bracelet. But there is an idea out there, and this is coming from Russia Insider. The Chinese actually hold a royal flush in this game. All they have to do to get the U.S. to release Ms. Meng is seize Sheldon Adelson's Chinese casinos. Say we're going to nationalize them. Because as I recall, Adelson is already in legal trouble with the Chinese government over a bribery scandal. So we're going to nationalize the casinos. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We have another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and this story is just breaking now. Defense Secretary James Mattis is retiring. He'll be stepping down from his post the end of next February. This was just announced by Donald Trump. So we'll see who he's going to get in there. But, Mattis was a war hawk. No two ways about it. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Mike. I hope you're having a wonderful day today.
I am.
What's on my mind? Cool. What's on my mind is I was listening to Roger Stone earlier today, and he was talking about Trump's tweets and about how if the Democrats actually go through with trying to remove him in any way, that the American public will, the American people will revolt. Do you see that in the same light as he does, or are we ready for that, or do you think that'll even happen?
I got to be honest. I think Trump is letting his ego get the better of him. He's unfortunately starting to believe his own propaganda about how loved he is and how popular he is. And that's always a dangerous situation for anybody, whether they're in government or entertainment. I don't really... There'd be a lot of anger and there might be a lot of protest, but a full-on revolt, I don't know. I don't think the American people are really ready for that yet.
I think you're right. And about the border, about the wall, man, I have the same feelings Art does, and probably the rest of the country. You know, we can send that much money to aid to Central and South America, but yet we can't have a wall. And I actually have a solution on the border wall anyway, something that could be a whole lot cheaper, and that would be landmines. But I know that's probably hateful, but I mean, I think it would work.
Yeah, it would, but again, there are now international treaties in place regarding the use of landmines, and there's going to be the ancillary problem of livestock stepping on a mine, which is going to anger farmers on both sides of the borders. So I don't think it's really a viable idea. You know, I just thought it would be great to just put crocodiles in the Rio Grande, but nobody listens to me about these things.
I think you're right. Well, that's all I have for you today, and I hope you give Miss Claire best wishes, and I hope you have a great day.
I thank you. I will, and I will. All right. Okay, North Korea has changed its negotiating posture regarding denuclearization. And North Korea is saying that the U.S. must completely eliminate its nuclear arsenal in that part of the world first, and then North Korea will feel they're comfortable enough where they can proceed with denuclearization. Now, I'm not sure what Kim Jong-un is thinking, because the United States could remove the nuclear weapons from that part of the world and then within 24 hours put them right back. Or they could use long-range ballistic missiles launched from the continental United States. But Kim Jong-un is putting focus on the fact that for all this talk about North Korea's nukes and Iraq's nukes and Iran's nukes and everybody's nukes, the United States is in fact the only country that has ever actually used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilians of another country, and they did it twice. So he does have a valid point here, but it does indicate to me that the bromance is over and that there'll be no further progress on the North Korean situation here. A video has surfaced from Venezuela showing the reception that the Russian pilots of those supersonic bombers received after landing. They were being treated like heroes. It was a very warm, emotional welcome. And of course, the Tu-160s themselves are impressive aircraft. Now, I don't like war, but the Russians build very beautiful aircraft. And the Tu-160 has the distinction of having the largest wingspan of any combat aircraft in use and being the fastest bomber in the world today. Now, Putin is planning a military base on the island of Orchila off the coast of Venezuela. This will put a Russian military presence in the Caribbean, not as close as Cuba, but in an age of hypersonic weapons and supersonic bombers, it doesn't really matter any longer here. All righty, we're going to take a phone call. Ken in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thank you. I've been wondering every once in a while when Trump appears to do something that one would think that people would expect him to do and like, is it possible that perhaps he just gets tired of being worn down and every once in a while he puts a poke back, for example, at the war machine?
Well, it may be, but I would hope what's happening, it's a little late in his administration for it to be happening, but I would hope what's happening is that he's starting to realize, that he is the president, and he does have certain powers, authorities, and prerogatives, and he's supposed to be a leader. And probably people who are advising him on his 2020 campaign are telling them that unless the American people start to see significant change in his behavior, especially regards the campaign promises he made, that he will be a one-term president. And that means, getting back on board vaccine safety, getting them back on board, cleaning up the election system, getting the Department of Justice and the FBI to finally look at what's going on with the Clinton email server and the Clinton Foundation. And I realize that's the third rail in Washington, D.C. Nobody wants to touch that because everybody's dirty with that foundation. And if I am correct that Hillary Clinton was using that private email server to sell U.S. secrets to foreign interests, that's a scandal that would bring the entire government down.
And do you notice, or I noticed, that this time, rather the last time he gave an order, it appeared that the Pentagon was just ignoring him and shuffling the papers and go on. But this one, I think, was so popular as far as the American people are concerned that I think he caught them all by surprise, and they couldn't very well criticize him, could they?
Well, you're absolutely right. Trump did not consult with the Pentagon or any of his advisors or anything before announcing the troop withdrawal from Syria. And now he's dropping hints that he wants to draw down the number of troops in Afghanistan. And he may have all of a sudden discovered that, yeah, he is the president and he has the right as commander-in-chief to dictate this policy. Now, he's got to be very, very dangerous here, because one of the reasons John F. Kennedy was assassinated was he was trying to get the United States out of Vietnam.
Among other things.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mike. That was all I had for tonight.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. All right, now, Vladimir Putin did one of his regular Q&As, and during the course of it, he made a very interesting comment. He said he regrets the growing global tendency of underestimating the risks of a nuclear war. And he said, I just thought somehow the danger of such a development in the world is somehow fading into the background. It seems impossible or something not so important. In the meantime, should anything like that happen, God forbid, this may result in the death of civilization and possibly the entire planet. And Putin hopes mankind will have enough common sense to prevent a third world war from ever happening. I certainly hope so too. Now, part of the issue is that because of the ban on above ground testing, nobody has seen a nuclear explosion live and in person since the end of the above ground tests. And nobody got to see, a bomb. The modern generation, to them, it's a video clip that they see on TV. And, the explosion is about the size of the TV screen. And they don't really comprehend just how powerful some of these weapons can be. When I'm talking to people around here on the island of Oahu about the possibility of a nuclear war, and they say, well, I live way up here in the hills here, and I don't have to worry about it. And I say, well, it all depends on who attacks us, because China's standard nuclear warhead is huge, and they do that because their ICBMs are notoriously inaccurate at hitting their targets exactly. So they just put a big bomb on the front of it, and just one of these Chinese nuclear weapons would turn this entire island into green glass. And a lot of people seem to have a hard time getting their mind around the idea of such a powerful explosion actually being real. But it is. And of course, for Claire and I, we're concerned about it because we have a first strike nuclear target right out that window there. Which, hey, at least we don't have to worry about retirement. Alrighty, we've got a couple of callers waiting on the line. We're going to start with Errol from the Netherlands. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, am I on the line?
You are on the air.
On the air, I mean on the air, yes. I came to a conclusion that the artificial intelligence also created by mankind is not the artificial intelligence that artificial intelligence would be, because they program the artificial intelligence in their mindset. So when you got neoliberals that want to program like YouTube and everything to censor all the people in the mindset to whatever, they created mindset of artificial intelligence, and real artificial intelligence would always look at the brighter spectrum. So what we see now happening also in 2019, the new year, what we are going to come in, the new year is those who control the AI programming are going to learn the AI program or programs, with an S, to see and to hear and to look, because they can look with webcams. They can analyze sound in program language, like sound, like music and everything. I see something happening that the so-called quote unquote artificial intelligence is not the real artificial intelligence. Because when the real artificial intelligence would be here, we had already another planet, and I worked here in Space Expo with Wibo Ockels, with André Kuipers. We have some talks. We had some talks, and Wibo Ockels told me, "This is our planet. We are wasting our planet, and we have not another planet to go to. So we have not a spare planet to go to." Wibo Ockels, he was an astronaut. He said in his final words, what the people nowadays are doing, also with programming or whatever, we need to get together. This Earth needs to survive because we have not got a spare planet. We need, he said, we need to let our own Earth survive, or it will diminish. And
well, I'm in agreement here.
I'm okay with that.
The problem is
we have no Stargate. We have no Stargate. Okay. Thank you for my call.
Okay.
Elaborate on it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. The problem here is that we don't have leadership that are really thinking about these kind of problems seriously. One of the artifacts of our system of government is everybody in power is thinking in time scales of 2 years or 4 years or maybe 6 or 8. Okay. Anybody who's talking about the environment is usually doing so as a scam to get more money from you, to get your obedience. That's what the global warming scam was all about. And even now they're still talking global warming, even as it's becoming obvious we're heading into a new Maunder minimum and a new ice age. They're not really looking at the real world. They're just caught up in their little political fantasy life here. And I don't know what it's going to take to actually get somebody to really wake up and say something does have to be done regarding the wise use of our resources, because war is one of the most wasteful and environmentally destructive things that there is, especially with these depleted uranium munitions that are being just scattered all over the planet. And it's very alarming. Anyway, let's take another phone call from Curtis in Nevada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I've listened to your show for a while, the last few months, and I just have a few things that I consider important and I'd like to try to share.
Okay.
So first of all, it's funny how the caravans have dropped from the news cycle, and within a few weeks now you've got this deal being cut on the side, which to me is not a real problem if it's not permanent, if it's a temporary fix. To get these people to understand that we are no longer open for business like we have been for the past 30 years. You come in here and just take advantage of us. So I don't have a problem with that. But I just wanted to say that I don't think there's going to be any major wars. I think that the deep state is beyond their ability now to start anything major. Okay? And that the leverage they have is much less than it was 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. There's still a war being fought, and it concerns me that people aren't paying attention. All these things that are happening are still shots being fired. But no, it's like they don't grasp that. It's like an isolated incident. And but for example, the Khashoggi thing is very important. It's very important. That's the reason why these state operatives
I agree. Curtis, Curtis, we got to take another commercial break. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we are talking with Curtis in Nevada. And Curtis, just kind of pick up where you left off.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, the deep state and the central banks are connected.
Yes.
They're
I think the private central bank is an integral part of the deep state.
Well, yeah, exactly. And all these Federal Reserves they have in various countries throughout the world, they're all subsidiaries. You know, they're all, everything's connected. But the thing is they know the economy is going to collapse, not just in the U.S. but worldwide, because by design, like you've been saying, they're not long-term economic type of a solution. All they do is they charge you interest. Well, we know that, and we know that the plan was for Hillary to, when she was to win, that they were going to engineer this war, cause a collapse, and blame it on the war. Like, that's their business model.
Yes.
Okay, that's been their business model for centuries. So what happened? Well, Trump disrupted that. So now they've been trying to desperately get a war going, but I honestly believe that Putin and Xi, for their own reasons, know this, and they're not going to let that happen. You know, so the Chinese were being groomed to be the next head of the table, like we were since World War II, after we fell. And then now that they know it's not going to happen, they released their hold on North Korea. Okay, and Putin's been fighting them. And Trump, what he's doing now, he's fighting the Federal Reserve. He's asking, why you keep raising interest rates? You're hurting the economy. That's part of the plan. Because now the Federal Reserve has no answers. They can't, blame it on a war or anything. So what's going to happen when the collapse will come?
Well, I think the reason
I don't know.
I think the reason the Federal Reserve is raising rates right now is that they want to basically undermine Trump's economy. And again, this is looking forward to that 2020 election when they're going to try and get him out of the White House, if in fact he's still in the White House in 2020. And it's not the first time the economy is being manipulated for political gain. And it does. It's hurting a lot of people. It's hurting ordinary Americans. But that's the whole point, to get them into difficulty, to get them hurting, and then say, oh, it was all Trump's fault. When, no, it isn't. It's the Federal Reserve's fault. And that's because the Federal Reserve, despite its name, is not actually a part of the federal government. It's a privately owned central bank, and it's no more federal than Federal Express.
Right. Mike, the thing is that they're fighting for control of the narrative. Who's going to be believed by the public? Trump's going to say we need to audit the Fed. See, that's what he's working towards. That the metrics he's using to measure the economy are the same ones the Fed was using. So the Fed can't say, "Oh, you're wrong, you're lying about the economy," because he'll just say, "Well, I was just using the same metrics that you were." It's all about the narrative of what happens when the collapse comes. Who's going to prevail? That's what it's all about.
Well, time will solve that mystery here. And Curtis, I'm going to have to let you go because we got to take a break for station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, more and more people are starting to take a look at the stark contrast between the handling of the Skripal poisoning and the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And of course, when the Skripals came down ill, it was just shrill reaction. Oh, it was Russia, the Skripal affair. Some people called it an active war. And, we're going to sanction like crazy. And this was all before there was any real investigation as to what had gone on. Now, supposedly, the nerve agent that the Skripals were attacked with, Novichok, is one of the most deadly in the world, and yet both of them survived. Now, early on, when that story began to break, they said the Skripals had been poisoned at a local restaurant, and there was a slip-up because in the news it said some of the other people at the restaurant had come down ill as well. Now, the restaurant serves pasta and seafood, and the Skripals were eating a dish that includes shellfish, which is very often, if it goes bad, you can get food poisoning, and that can make you really, really sick for a long time. So nobody really knew. There was no evidence. But with the regarding Khashoggi, they're now admitting he was like Mohammed bin Salman himself ordered the hit, and yet nothing. We can't jeopardize our relationship with our great ally, Saudi Arabia. So, story coming on out of Russia today. Christopher Steele has basically come on out. He's going through a legal challenge of his own in Great Britain. And as the testimony comes out, some interesting things are surfacing. And apparently, he is saying that the Trump-Russia dossier, which we now know was a complete fiction from top to bottom, was created to give Hillary Clinton a legal basis to try and challenge the 2016 election results. Apparently, after Trump won, she said, we got to find some way where I can challenge and overturn this. And apparently, calmer heads prevailed and said, we don't need a constitutional crisis like that. But that was really apparently the motivation for this whole Russia collusion situation. Trump can't be president. He was being helped by Russia. Now, it turns out that the late Arizona Senator John McCain was the person who leaked a copy of that Steele dossier to BuzzFeed News. This is according to a Wednesday court filing, according to the Daily Caller. And apparently McCain dispatched former State Department official David Kramer to London, where the dossier author, Christopher Steele, allowed Kramer to see it, while a copy was later provided to McCain through Kramer. McCain then provided a copy of the document to former FBI Director James Comey during a December 9th meeting. Now, on Wednesday, thanks to a filing by U.S. District Court Ursula Ungaro as part of a final report ahead of her ruling, we learned that Kramer provided BuzzFeed a copy of the dossier during a December 29th, 2016 meeting. And it's unclear whether Kramer actually gave Ken Bensinger a copy or if Bensinger simply took photos of the document or both, which is kind of irrelevant. But here is the upshot of it. Despite the bad news about saying that this Russian who was named in the dossier was not a public figure, the court basically ruled ultimately in BuzzFeed's favor, saying the document was protected by fair report privilege. So good for BuzzFeed. They got away from that one. Other documents that surfaced in this lawsuit against BuzzFeed revealed that Paul Ryan's chief of staff received a copy of this dossier directly from Christopher Steele. And again, a reminder, it has since been determined it was a complete fantasy. It was just totally made up, including that part about Trump and two prostitutes soiling the bed in a Moscow hotel. They probably put that in there because they figured that would get the sizzle, that would get the corporate media going. Okay. Okay, apparently Curtis in Nevada called back in. What about the idea of a donate to border wall fund option on the tax forms? Well, it may not be necessary because, again, the House is putting the border wall funding back in. And that GoFundMe, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. The GoFundMe that was set up by that triple amputee veteran has already gone way over $1 million. In fact, I think it's 6 million, something like that. So it's going strong. Americans are paying for the wall. Americans want that wall. And this government really does need to start waking up to what Americans want. Not what the Israelis want, not what the illegal immigrants want, not what the refugees want, not what Big Pharma wants, not what the military-industrial complex wants. Better start listening to what the American people wants, or there are going to be a lot of yellow vests out there in the streets next spring. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And it's looking like progressives in the Democratic Party are sort of split over who they want to run in 2020. And so far, two radical left interest groups have polled their members, and they got different answers to the big question. One group picked Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Another group picked California Senator Kamala Harris, the prevaricating, high-handed interrogator of white men who appear before her committees. and a reminder that Kamala Harris was listed on a recent article about America's top 10 most corrupt politicians. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. How are you? Yeah, it looks like Trump might get the wall after all, because the funding for the wall. Because I see right now the Republicans are voting, and we'll see how this plays out. But it's very interesting. Yeah, Michael. What I want to talk about is this Russia collusion with Mueller and Jerome Corsi. How do you think that thing's going to turn out with Corsi suing Mueller? And is it true that I found out that Mueller made, I believe it was $60 million from Boeing? How did Mueller get so much money out of Boeing Airlines? I mean, the company of Boeing. I heard that on, I think it was Breitbart. I saw that, where this guy Mueller's got, I mean, literally millions of dollars from Boeing. And how come Mueller's not being investigated?
Well,
and I
Mueller got that money from
$350 million.
Okay, Boeing didn't give that money to Mueller because he knows how to put engines on aircraft. It's the people he knows. They were paying for access. They were paying for his connections. That's the stock and trade of people at the upper levels of the government. I will have a consulting fee or a speaking fee, but what they're really buying, what they're really accessing, are those lines of communications to get to the people they feel they need to get to. But as far as Mueller's investigation, it's come up empty. All these months and all that money, and all he's succeeded in doing is lawfaring a bunch of minor players, using entrapment in the case of Michael Flynn. But they haven't come up with anything about the Russian collusion. He's drawn a blank. It's time for him to shut down and let this whole nonsense go.
Yeah, Michael, let me ask you, is Corsi going to have a chance to win his suit against Mueller? Because I think it's like $350 million he's suing him for. Maybe wouldn't that be something if Corsi actually were to win his case against Mueller?
I think it would be a great thing. I think it would be wonderful. I mean, Corsi basically refused to do a deal with Mueller. He refused to lie. Which unfortunately is what Mueller and FBI and Department of Justice are literally trying to get others like Michael Flynn to do. That's why they delayed Michael Flynn's sentencing, to give him more time to, quote, cooperate with Mueller. And I can imagine sitting in his position. The idea is if you tell a little lie about Donald Trump here, then you'll be out of prison in 6 months. If you don't play along with us, you're going to go away for 10 years. Or something like that. And that would put a lot of pressure on anybody. But I'm glad Corsi is suing Mueller, and it would certainly bring into the public eye just how corrupt Mueller's investigation was. I mean, we now have James Comey himself admitting the manner in which Michael Flynn was interviewed did not follow standard protocols, and that Mueller was not informed it was a formal interview.
Yeah, Michael, one more thing. I was going to ask you if you could pull up the figure and make sure it's correct. I believe I saw in I think it was one of the defense magazines I saw at the bookstore. Is it true that the United States gives Israel $13 billion a year for their military? And I guess we built their wall over there. We keep funding them. But actually, what was the actual number of taxpayers' dollars going to the state of Israel and paying for their military? What is it? How many billions is it?
Well, it's quite a lot, and I don't have the exact number, but I know that over the years since the creation of Israel, the American taxpayer has given Israel 20 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program, and we don't have an improved Velcro to show for it. Part of the problem in determining these numbers is nobody wants you to know. Congress doesn't want you to know. Israel doesn't want you to know. And one of the ways in which Congress will shove more money at Israel, and you don't find out about it, is they will loan Israel money, and then somewhere down the road in the dead of night, Congress will vote to forgive that debt so that Israel doesn't have to pay it back. Another scam that they'll do is they'll over-order weapon systems for our military, brand new stuff, then they'll declare the overrun to be surplus, and they'll sell it to Israel for pennies on the dollar. I mean, it's just scam after scam after scam after scam.
What an amazing thing, Michael. Michael, and then one more thing. Breitbart, I think it was Breitbart or Drudge, I can't remember which one it was, but maybe it was both. They said there's over 40 million illegals in the United States, not 22 million, not 18 million, 16. We've been lied to. The public has been lied to so bad, it's horrifying. It's 40 million illegals.
I would not be surprised at all.
The ones that come in here every year.
Well, nobody's able to really
count
them. Nobody's able to really count them because, what are you going to do? Walk into a large area and say, all you illegals raise your hand so we can do a head count? They're not going to do that. They're scared of, well, I guess these days they're not scared of immigration anymore.
But we can't give Trump the $5 billion to build the wall, but we can give Israel. We can bring in all these illegals. California's gone. That was a place of Reagan and Nixon, and California's totally gone. You'll never see a Republican get any electoral votes out of that state ever, and it's a matter of time before they take over Texas. There's no question about it.
That's the idea. The Democrats are flooding illegals into this country. They're getting them to vote even though they're not supposed to, and that's to get a lock on power. And the Democrats are already expecting that they're going to take the Senate and the White House in 2020, and the Republican Party, unless they start showing some spine, they're going to be relegated to a political joke. The party that can't get elected anywhere.
The Democrats changed the demographics of this country over the last 35, 40 years. They've literally have changed the demographic, and there should be people. I don't know what to say. People be swinging for what they've done to this country. It's deplorable. It's despicable. It's disgusting. And people are still so blinded. You got that bumbling Pelosi, and you got this broad over here with every blabbermouth Schultz. I mean, it's unbelievable, and people actually vote for these people to hold on to power. It's just amazing.
Well, we're not sure that people actually voted for them. I mean, there's so much election fraud going on in this country. You've got, the illegal immigrant vote. And one of my big disappointments in Donald Trump is that he did come on into office saying he was going to get the election system cleaned up. And then he basically disbanded his commission. He said, we're going to turn the issue over to the Department of Homeland Security. All Homeland Security did was go on out and say, we're going to make sure that nobody can hack into the electronic voting machines. That does not fix the problem. What would fix a big part of the problem right now is mandatory national voter ID laws. But every time you say that, somebody screams at you, you're being a racist. Okay? But illegal is not a race.
Well, Michael, I got to say this one more thing. I'll let you go. I know your callers. When Ron DeSantis won the governorship of Florida, the day before the election, on the 5th, all the Herald, all these papers, the Sentinel, I saw them all. They were all saying that this guy Gilliam's going to win in the landslide. And I told my buddies, no, he's not. Don't worry, DeSantis is going to win this. Everybody thought I was crazy. I said, no, DeSantis is going to win this. I told that DeSantis was going to win it, and then he wins. And you don't hear nothing but other than the fact that Brenda Snipes, the one in Broward County, was trying to steal the election from Scott and DeSantis. It was unbelievable. And that woman still is trying to hold on to power. And the criminal activity she's pulled.
Yep.
So it's just amazing to me. It's just amazing to me what's going on. But thank God we got DeSantis in the state of Florida and Scott. Otherwise, if this guy Gillum would have won, Michael, I don't know what would have happened to the state. It would have been horrifying. Yeah. Well, I had to tell you what would happen, Michael. Everybody in New York and New Jersey would be moving into Florida by the droves.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And the fact is, looking at everywhere across the country where the Democrats have power, the quality of life is deteriorating. They've gone horribly into debt. Places like Chicago, Baltimore, the nation is rotting on the vine. We're being turned into a third world banana republic. And it is by design by the globalists.
Venezuela. We're Venezuela, Michael. We're Venezuela.
Well, we're not there yet.
The Democrats are Venezuela.
We're headed in that direction.
Yes,
okay?
Sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Okay. Right now, looking at 2020, and I'm wondering why we're obsessed with 2020, because we just got out of the 2018 midterms. Don't these politicians have other things to be doing besides obsessing about the next election. But apparently there is an unprecedented 45 Democrats are now in the race for the party's nomination to challenge President Trump in 2020. And that's historic. There's never been that many candidates throwing their hat into the ring. Okay, now here's an interesting story, and it gets back to all that nonsense about Russia collusion. Apparently, Democratic operatives created thousands of Twitter accounts posing as Russian bots in order to boost Alabama Democratic Senator Doug Jones in the October 2017 special election by linking his Republican opponent, Roy Moore, to Russian influence campaigns. Apparently, this was all paid for by liberal billionaire Reid Hoffman. It was independent of Jones' campaign. They created more than 1,000 Russian-language accounts that followed Moore's Twitter account overnight. And the New York Times reported Wednesday evening, Hoffman gave the operatives $100,000 for their project, which included creating fake conservative Facebook accounts to dissuade voters from supporting Moore. It was an elaborate false flag operation, and the media either fell for it or they were complicit with it. Now, one of the alarming developments we're starting to see here is this attitude of, if we can't get Trump, go after his family. And we saw that from the new U.S. Attorney for New York and a former Watergate prosecutor, Carter administration official, and I didn't get his name in the cut and paste here. But he's out there saying the same thing. Can't get Trump, indict his children, throw them in jail. That apparently is the Democrats' idea of justice. Even the mafia has a rule. You don't go after the family. So I used to say it looks like our society is being run by organized crime, and I'm sorry, that was an insult to organized crime, because they would not stoop as low as some of these people. All right, big stink. There was this reporter, considered a top journalist over at Der Spiegel, was named as CNN's Reporter of the Year in 2014, and it turned out he's been faking his news reports all along, making up characters, making up stories. He's been forced to resign now. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the address where you can help Republic Broadcasting, and we've been good little girls and boys this year. The postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. Okay. Getting on back to the news here. Let's talk about the economy for a while. Apparently, the Trump middle-class tax cut is now on hold. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said that a 10% tax cut for the middle class Trump called for ahead of the midterm elections is now on the back burner. And Mnuchin was being interviewed by Bloomberg and said, I'm not going to comment on whether it is a real thing or not a real thing. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, no, it's not a real thing. This government is broke. They are completely out of money, and they need to find ways of getting more of it from you. Article out of Investment Research Dynamics, the financial system is becoming increasingly unstable. And this is coming on out of Bloomberg, which is talking about the collateralized loan obligation market as Wall Street's billionaire machine. But that CLO market was one of the nuclear bombs that blew up and triggered the collapse of 2008. But apparently it's back. There's no regulation against it. It's making money for the money junkies, and that, of course, is a good thing. And when it blows up again, and it will, once again, ordinary Americans will be expected to cover the losses, because that's how it works. Apparently, there's another round of class action lawsuits against J.P. Morgan Chase that were triggered by the confessions by a former futures trader for the bank who pleaded guilty to manipulating the monetary metals market. And the Fed and the Treasury and J.P. Morgan have created a massive fraud in gold and silver that is going to blow up. And right now, 6 major banks are accused of or have been fined for rigging the metals market in recent years. And the other problem that's out there that nobody's talking about are all those gold future contracts, because one of the ways they keep the price of gold down is they'll blend the price of those gold future contracts with the price of the physical metal. And then they overprint the contracts so that there seems to be a huge supply and the price goes down. But right now, those gold future contracts are leveraged something like 100 to 1. That means that for every 100 ounces of contracted gold, there is only 1 physical ounce, which means at some point there's going to be a gold run. Somebody's going to get wise and they're going to say, I want the physical. I'm not going to roll the contract over for a cash bonus. I want the physical metal in my possession. And that's going to spread here. Meanwhile, the U.S. shale oil industry is in a bloodbath. Oil prices are continuing to drop, and it's putting severe stress on fracking, which a lot of people think might be a good thing if they went away. Because, again, we're seeing across the United States an increase in earthquakes in areas where these fracking injection wells are operating. Now, the Senate has just okayed an $867 billion with a B dollar farm bill. Boy, that's getting close to challenging the Pentagon for the amount of spending here. And a lot of that goes into this federal food program. And there was a little bit of contention over this because in this version of the 5-year federal farm bill, there was a requirement. People who were on SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, had to work, even if it was volunteer work, or spend 20 hours a week looking for a job in order to qualify for SNAP, and that was taken out. The liberals came on in and said, oh, you're being insensitive, and really can't do that. So they took that out. And for those who are able to work, I understand there are people on SNAP who can't, but for those who are able to work, yeah, getting some labor out of them, even if it's just cleaning up the highways or getting them out there to look for a job, I think is a good idea. But the welfare state wants more people on welfare because that way the supplemental nutrition program, they get more money. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news here, and the Fed did raise rates again today, and it sent the stock market into a tailspin. The Dow was down over 500 at one point and ended 464 down. And again, I can understand why Donald Trump is asking the Fed, are you trying to wreck the economy? Yeah, in a way they are. They want to basically wreck the economy, and so the Democrats can blame Trump for it going into the 2020 campaign. By the way, they were just running a story on Fox News here, and it relates to that story I was saying about how there are 45 different Democrats are already vying for the Democratic nomination. Apparently, they're scheduling debates between these various Democratic hopefuls starting just next year. I mean, it's like campaign season is now 365 days a year. In other countries, there's actually a limit. that the campaign season is only so many months before the actual election, and the rest of the time everybody does other things, like get the roads fixed. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, free food's on my mind, Mike.
Okay.
You know, this issue about having to work is kind of a if you have to go get food stamps, you have to bring in your W-2s, all that kind of crap, and then if you're still not working, it's not that easy just to get food stamps. But if you're a social worker, the worst thing that can happen to you is for these idiots in Washington to put across the board work requirements for food stamps, because you're going to get shot and killed. You're going to take a social worker who has to make the decision on whether this 6'5", 240-pound ex-football player for some reason can't have food stamps. It turns the social worker's job into a real dangerous situation.
Well,
So,
arm the social workers.
We all want to see.
Let them carry conceal.
But I mean, how about the farm bill? How about all the free money the farmers get?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's another area with a huge amount of corruption in it, is the farm subsidies program. But
come on,
let me come in here for just a second. Right now, with the tariff wars going on, there are some farmers out there who basically do need that assistance. There are other people who take advantage of the farm subsidies, people who are very, very rich and they own land and they're not farming it, and they get a subsidy to not grow food on land they wouldn't be growing food on anyway. And that's something that we see among a lot of politicians. So there are serious problems with that whole farm.
The agricultural, right, but what gets ripped off in the farm bill on agriculture is way more getting ripped than these people getting free food on food stamps. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Okay, talking about the economy here. The global auto industry has entered their first recession since 2009. And basically, they're using as a signal the fact that production is dropping around the world from all the world's automakers, which we knew sooner or later it was going to have to. They've been cranking out the cars, and they're piling up in these storage lots or at the dealerships. We have this old abandoned, well, it's not abandoned, but it's repurposed, used to be a 4-screen drive-in movie theater at the bottom of the hill. And it used to be a flea market on the weekends, which was kind of fun to walk through. Now it's being rented out as an overflow lot for the dealerships, and it is jam-packed with brand new cars. They can't sell them. People don't have the money. People don't want to take out the loans, especially with the Fed raising rates. That's driving the cost of credit for everybody up. Now, up in Chicago, as you know, they're dealing with a major pension debt, as are so many other places in the country. And Mayor Rahm Emanuel has come up with a couple of ideas. He wants to legalize recreational marijuana and open a city-owned gambling casino, and hopes that that will bring in enough money from the pockets of the Chicagoans to help deal with the pension debt. If you're going to take money away from the people, at least make it enjoyable, which is a good approach, but one has to wonder what's next, a city-owned brothel? Over in Great Britain, their government is being slammed over a 24% rise in homelessness over the last 5 years. And it's a major problem. This winter being exceptionally hard, we're already seeing winter deaths, people who are freezing to death in their homes. And there's the usual finger pointing, well, it's climate change, it's this or that. The plain fact of the matter is these people they can't afford to heat their homes, and they're freezing to death. So getting on back to Trump's border wall, and this may be a little bit late, but the Freedom Caucus was planning a special session on the floor of the House, basically a last-ditch effort for Trump's border wall. But it may actually come to fruition because, again, the House is now voting on a new budget that includes the border wall funding. Okay, now, somebody just sent me an update on that GoFundMe page. The guy who started it is Brian Colfage. He is a Purple Heart recipient, triple amputee veteran, and he set up this GoFundMe for the wall. It has now reached almost $8 million, and that should be sending a message. The American people want this wall. They want this immigration situation to be resolved. Now, Ted Cruz has actually come up with what I think is a really good idea. And he came on in and said, look, the U.S. government just seized $14 billion from El Chapo. Why don't we use part of that to build the wall? And I think that's a really good idea, although I'm sure probably the U.S. government has already said, no, we got to send that $14 billion to Israel or something. But yeah, that's a really good idea. That was the whole point of civil forfeiture, to seize the ill-gotten gains of criminals and use it to basically, strengthen the defense against the crime. And we know that because of our currently open southern border, huge amounts of illegal drugs are coming on into this country. So, Ted, way to go. You did well on that one here. And another article coming out of the Washington Examiner saying that government spending for illegal immigrants should outrage all Americans. And it's rather interesting because one of the arguments you see from the open border people is that somehow all these illegal immigrants coming into the country are actually a net gain for the economy. And no, they are not. When you look at the actual numbers, they are a strain on our economy here. Last week, New Jersey became the 10th state to offer financial aid to illegal immigrants. This is along with other states like California, Texas, and Connecticut. Illegal immigrants in New Jersey can now receive in-state tuition as well as taxpayer-funded scholarships. Meanwhile, if you are a U.S. citizen who's a student, you're going to have to go get a student loan. Now, a rational person might ask several questions about this new New Jersey law, like how much it's going to cost, whether such a law encourages more illegal immigration. Yes, it will. And whether this law is going to eliminate scholarship opportunities for American citizens. These are all valid questions, but the politicians and the immigration activists in New Jersey and around the country simply do not care. To them, being an American citizen means nothing. They see everybody as equal, and these activists will stop at nothing to grant illegal immigrants the rights and benefits of legal American citizens. Out in California, there was an audit done on the California Department of Motor Vehicles, and it shows that about 1,500 customers may have been improperly registered to vote. And I would suspect that the number is actually much, much higher. And that this is actually spin to say, see, it wasn't really all that bad. And the DMV is saying the error has been corrected. Another error that they found is that apparently the DMV mishandled thousands of voter registrations, where apparently they sent the Secretary of State's office 23,000 erroneous voter registrations which were rejected. Which means the people who thought they were registered to vote because they'd been to the DMV and gotten a license weren't able to vote here. Up in San Francisco, and this happened a while back, San Francisco spent $310,000 to register 49 non-citizens to be able to vote in the school election. And basically, this follows the 2016 ballot measure by San Francisco voters. opening the school elections to non-citizens who are over the age of 18, are city residents, and have children under the age of 19. But this drive to register these voters came out to costing about $6,300 per individual voter. Now, back in March, California appointed an undocumented immigrant to a state post. Lisbeth Mateo does have a law degree, and she has her own firm in Metro Los Angeles, and she was appointed last March to a state Senate committee. Nobody really cares about American citizenship anymore. Another flashback we have here is how 2 immigrants in the U.S. illegally were named to Huntington Park commissions. Are you really certain that you cannot find a legal American citizen able to do these jobs? It's just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Now, a little bit of good news over in North Carolina. State lawmakers used their supermajority in the state's General Assembly to override a veto issued by Democrat Governor Roy Cooper of a law that says North Carolina voters will now be required to show photo ID before casting their ballots at the polling station. And of course, once again, the left-wing activists just came on out and said, this is an issue about race. It's an issue about race. No, it's an issue about who is legally allowed to vote and who is not. That's what this is really about. Now, this one's going to make your hair stand up. This is coming out of Prison Planet. Swedish moderate party leader Ulf Kristersson insists that it's crucial for young Swedes to learn Arabic if they're going to be successful in the future. And he made that comment during a speech at the Haymarket Hotel in Stockholm. And this moderate party leader said that in order to assure Sweden's competitiveness in this increasingly globalized economy, it's crucial for the long-term success of Swedish students to master not only English, school-level French, and school-level German, but also Arabic and Chinese. Now, that's quite a workload for people who are not savvy in languages, but it is an alarming statement about just how much Europe has been now invaded by these refugees. And because of all these refugees pouring in from the Middle East and Africa, Europe is becoming increasingly Islamic. Arabic is now Sweden's largest minority language. For hundreds of years, it was Finnish, was the second most spoken language in Sweden. Now it's Arabic here. Now, here's an interesting little story. Members of the German and European parliaments are going to London to publicly stand up for Julian Assange's human and asylum rights and ensure he is protected from eviction this Christmas. This is German Member of Parliament Heike Hansel and Sevim Dagdelen will meet Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. Actually, they did it today. This was in response to reports of an imminent end to his asylum. And they will give a statement outside the embassy and offer interviews at Frontline Club later on today. Well, that's already happened by now, given the time zones here. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude Juncker is warning that a no-deal Brexit will be a catastrophe. And he's out there just fear-mongering and doom-saying, saying, you know, there'll be grounded British flights and the worst border chaos since wartime. And basically, there was already an agreement for flights to continue, but Brussels is saying they'll cancel that. If there's a no-deal Brexit, Brussels is looking to punish Great Britain as hard as they can. So, Now, according to the plans, British Airlines would be allowed to operate flights between the UK and the continent, but they would be barred from flying between European Union airports or operating services from Europe to the United States. All right. Now, everybody's out there like Juncker saying, a no-deal Brexit is going to be horrible, it's going to be terrible. And it's time to really start looking at what's going to happen if Britain remains attached to the European Union. Because if you go back to the Treaty of Lisbon, there is a timeline of steps, and each of those steps further erodes the independence and sovereignty of the member states of the EU. And Great Britain doesn't want that. If they don't do Brexit now, they're not going to have the legal right to do so in the very, very near future. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And over at Gatwick Airport in Great Britain, somebody was playing games here, and the airport was actually shut down because somebody flew drones over the runway, forcing all the flights to be suspended, leaving hundreds and thousands of travelers who were trying to get away for the Christmas weekend stranded. A lot of people are already on the road or in the air or on board ship for their Christmas holiday. And so it was a real problem. They even thought about bringing out snipers trying to shoot the drones down, trying to find out where the operators were. I mean, they couldn't be that far away. And just before the airport was due to reopen, the drones showed up again. It was spotted over the runway just minutes before it was due to reopen. Now, the police are saying that this is obviously a deliberate act, but they're saying it doesn't appear to be terror related. The drones are not, attacking the aircraft. They're just interfering with the air traffic. Okay, activists are out there launching what's called the Phones Out campaign. And this was in response to an LMPD arrest that ended with the suspect in a neck brace. Somebody got it on cell phone video. It went viral. And the Louisville Urban League is hosted a news conference saying that people have got to get those phones out when they see the police misbehaving. If it's just one person, the police can harass them, they can break the phone. But if there's a crowd of people and they all have their cell phone cameras out, there's nothing the police can do about it. And remember, if you're in a situation like that, the courts have ruled that it is legal to take video of police when they're out there in their job. They have no expectation of privacy when they're out there clubbing somebody to the ground here. Now, over at Tesco, the PC-ness is on display there again. Apparently, they had a girls' toys aisle, and customers immediately accused Tesco of sexism. Oh, you're segregating an aisle for girls' toys. Well, a lot of stores will tend to do that. They may not label them boys' toys and girls' toys, but they know that boys are going to be boys and girls are going to be girls, and they're going to want to look at things. So the dolls will all be grouped together, and all the trucks and movie action figures are going to be someplace else. And if they want to go into the other aisles, they can. There's no problem. But they're making such a big deal out of this. They really, really are. All right. We're coming up here on our station. Actually, we're coming up on the end of my show. And for those of you who care to stick around, I'm taking over. I'm doing John Stedmiller's show for the next 2 hours. So stay tuned, and we're going to be right back.
Must only if that works. Not
Broadcasting Network.